Well, hi there, baby bats. It's your goth dad, Dusty. The other day I was talking to my wife and her friend, and I was telling them this story. It's this completely insane story from my firefighter paramedic days. And Scarlett said, hey, you really need to start telling these stories because apparently dad lore is a thing. Since I'm your internet goth dad, apparently, I need to tell you my dad lore stories. I'm going to do a bunch of videos that just have crazy stories, funny stories, maybe some sad stories, but interesting stories from all the crazy chaotic shit that I've done in my life. So we'll start right up top with one of the best ones, and this one is borderline unbelievable. When I tell people this story, a lot of the times they go, are you for real? That really happened? I'm like, yes, this absolutely happened. Back in 2018, I was finishing up my precepting time as a paramedic in the fire department. So I had a field training supervisor with me on every single call, making sure I didn't give the wrong drug dosages, effectively killing people with incompetence or whatever. And I did really well during my precepting time, but it was largely uneventful. I only ran a couple traumas, a couple cardiac arrests, but nothing too chaotic. You got to understand, fire department shifts in that department were 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. So it's 24 hours. And culturally, you show up between 6 and 6:30. That way, if anybody takes a late call, they don't end up on the ambulance bringing a patient in, hours after they're done with their shift. But on the final morning of my precepting, it's about 6:30 in the morning, and we get a call, and it's a cardiac arrest. Unfortunately, the oncoming crew had not arrived yet, so we had to go jump in the ambulance and the fire engines, and we roll off to this call. But before we headed out, as I'm running to the ambulance, a student from an EMT school is walking through the door. And this kid couldn't have been a day over 18. He was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And he literally was like, I'm here for my first shift as an EMT. And I was like, get on the bus! And, I picked him up, threw him in the back of the ambulance, and off we went. So en route, we have what's called an MDT, which is a little computer. And it's basically a live transcription of dispatch. And the only information that we had on it basically said something about a dog fight, and there's blood, and there's somebody screaming in the background. So we have effectively no information about what we're going into. We arrive to this house. It's a split level house. We get up to almost to the house, and the cop shows up with us because he's going in first, because he's armed, and we don't know what the reality of this situation is. Before we get up to the house, we can smell rotting garbage. It's not death, it's rotten garbage. The next thing we notice is this really loud barking from very clearly two different dogs, and they're just going crazy. So we get up to the door. The cop throws the door open, and there are two gigantic dogs, and they were tied with rope around their necks to this exposed pipe in the wall that was immediately to our left. And the cop, I don't know how he did this, but he just immediately untied it, and then to our right was the door to the garage, and he threw the dogs in there and slammed the door, and we were all like, what in the hell is going on? So inside this house, it's completely pitch black. You can't see anything, but the light coming from the outside, from the sunlight, gave us enough vision to see there's a staircase going down and a staircase going up from the landing. And at the top of the staircase going up is a woman, and she's just paper white standing there, and she's just pointing into the room, and she's just going, oh, whoa, oh. And we are like, what's going on? Ma'am, can you tell us what's happening? She can't say a word. So we start moving up, and then we start hearing this man screaming, just screaming bloody murder. So we get up onto the second floor, and in the second floor, it's a hoarder house. So there's just stuff from floor to ceiling, but the people had sort of made a little ant trail through all the stuff that they were hoarding. And we kind of go through the room, and there are two light sources. They're very dim. One is an old CRT television on the floor blasting a Garth Brooks music video. And then another is a broken fixture light, and it's literally swinging back and forth because somebody knocked it. So we're just getting this strobe light image of what is before us. And what is before us is complete insanity. there was a very, very large woman who looked visibly dead. She looked to be in very bad shape, to say the least. She was wearing this white nightgown, and it was just quite literally rotten. It was so foul. It just looked putrid. So she's laying face up in this gigantic pool of blood, like kind of spread eagle, and it's just everywhere. But on top of her is this equally large man wearing whitey tighties, and he is just screaming on top of her. And he's kind of like blowing into her mouth, like trying to do, resuscitation of some sort. But the cop goes up and picks him up off of her and is like, "What's going on?" And the guy is just like, "Ah! Ah!" just screaming. The cop takes him aside. I'm looking at this woman. I'm like, she's in cardiac arrest. I mean, you can just sometimes you just look at it. But I check for pulse, check for responsiveness. There's no pulse, but she's still warm. So, I started CPR. But then that student is behind me. So I'm like, "Hey, come work on this woman." So he starts doing CPR, but he's not doing a very good job, because when you do CPR, if you're doing it effectively, oftentimes you're going to break ribs. You're going to hear intercostal tissue pop from between your ribs. So I'm like, "You need to really push, man." And he's like, "Oh my God." So he's pumping away. I cut off the nightie and I'm looking for trauma because there's this giant pool of blood beneath her. I look from head to toe and I don't really see anything right away. We need to get out of here. That's my brain immediately is like, all right, we need to get out of this house. We need to get her in the ambulance and we need to go. So we put her on what's called a mega mover, which is basically a tarp with handles. And we all lift her out and get her outside. We put her on the gurney, and as soon as we do that, the fire engine actually arrived a little later than we did. We got there a lot faster because they got held up in traffic. And one of the real tough guy firefighters on my crew at the time, he's a really good dude, but he was always like real, I'm a badass kind of dude. He comes up and he's like, "What do we got?" And I opened up the tarp that this woman was held in, and she smelled so bad that he immediately projectile vomited all over the bushes, and I got a kind of a small chuckle out of that. Anyway, we get her in the ambulance. We're on our way to the hospital. I'm, immediately looking for basically any signs of massive bleeding. You can do CPR, you can give all the life-saving drugs, you can do all the interventions you want, but if you don't stop bleeding, it doesn't matter. They're going to die. I look from head to toe 3 different times, and the only thing I find are 2 very obviously small dog bites in her calf. It's not in an area that has any arterial process. It's just these small bites. And I'm just totally perplexed because I'm like, why was there all this blood? We're on our way and we're doing CPR, but one thing that I did do is we kept her bra on because she had very large breasts. She was very well endowed. Sometimes when you're doing CPR, breasts can impede your ability to do them because of, we'll call it floppage. But I put her on the cardiac monitor, to see if we need to cardiovert her, like shock her or whatever. But normally when you put somebody on a cardiac monitor that's in cardiac arrest, you'll see maybe ventricular fibrillation where the heart is trying to do something, so it just looks like a bunch of squiggly lines, or asystole, which is the flat line. This woman had perfect rhythm. It just wasn't mechanically capturing. So her heart was doing something. It just wasn't working. And it looked so perfect that I kept checking her pulses because I was like, she must have a pulse. I checked her femoral pulses. I checked everywhere. Nothing. So I call into the hospital, let them know we're coming. Now, we arrive. The doctor, immediately, I give him a report. We put her on the table. That whole emergency department team starts going to work. So the first thing the doctor does is says, "Hey, let's cut that bra off just to make sure there's nothing we've missed." A nurse cuts the bra off, and out from her left boob fell a gigantic bag of crystal meth. It was so big that it fell onto a metal tray table next to the bed, and it made an audible smacking sound. Immediately, the nurse scribe that basically calls out everything that's being done and writes it down, wrote and said, "Annotate large bag of crystalline material produced from patient's left breast." Unfortunately, that woman did not survive. But a couple days later, I was on shift again, bringing another patient into that same hospital, And one of my favorite nurses that was on shift for that experience came up to me all excitedly, and she said, "Oh my God, did you hear about what happened with that woman and her brother?" And I was like, "No, I don't know anything about that whole situation." What we come to find out is that the man who was screaming on top of that woman's body was this woman's brother. In the morning, this woman woke up to feed these giant dogs. They might have been like fighting dogs or something. I don't know. While she's feeding them, they start fighting over food. She tries to stop them. The dog apparently bit her and she just dropped dead. Her brother, right there in the kitchen, comes in to see this happening. The dog's fighting over her. He tries to separate the dogs, and one of the dogs bit his thumb off. And that's where all the blood came from. We just didn't get to see it because the cop took that guy aside, and it was like basically pitch black inside of that house. Now that guy refused transport when the cop finally realized that he was missing a thumb. By the way, they never found the thumb because the dog ate his thumb. 2 days later, he shows up in that same emergency room, and his arm is basically becoming gangrenous and rotten, so they had to take him in, and he had to have interventions. After this crazy call, though, when we were going back to the firehouse, we have this kid, and he is just kind of traumatized at this point. Like, he is just totally blown away at what he has just seen. And, you know, I tried to talk to him. I was like, hey, man, you know, it's okay if you're a little freaked out. Like, that was a hell of a call. Like, I've never seen anything like that. You know, my lieutenant who was on the call with us, he's like, man, I've never seen anything like that either. I just told him, like, hey, make sure when you get back to school, like, if you need to talk to somebody, like, let someone know. It's okay. It takes, you know, courage to ask for help. And, you know, this might come back to haunt you, so to speak. And he was like, oh, I appreciate that. So we get into the bay. We pull the vehicle, and this kid is still like just bug-eyed and like kind of dazed. I'm about to leave for the day. We're all covered in blood and God only knows what else. The kid kind of stopped me and he was like, hey, is it like this every day? And our salty, super grizzled engineer of our engine came up and he goes, yeah, it's like this every day. So needless to say, we never saw that kid again. Hope he's doing well. Never a dull moment as a paramedic firefighter. After that call, we affectionately referred to that woman as Titty Meth, which is a bit of dark firefighter humor for you. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the story. I will be telling some more stories kind of like that, and just dad lore, because apparently the kids love the dad lore. Speaking of cardiac arrest and dying breaths, my band Agonal Gasps is going to be going on tour in Europe in November to support The Chameleons, my favorite band of all time, one of the best 80s post-punk bands ever. Go check that out at agonalgasps.com. We'll see you next time for the next story, and until then, stay strange.